Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and 2 weeks ago I visited Portland to connect with a whole bunch of Leica animators, and it was really neat. This chat features Future House Animation Studios director and animation supervisor Ryan Bird and their founder Adam Sidwell. In our chat, they're going to share how they've been building client projects within the Metaverse, like virtual concerts, sales meetings, and games, and how they started working in VR in the first place, and how they get clients and what they do and all that fun stuff. But first, remember, I've been drinking Magic Mind's productivity shots every day. Well, it's been 2 weeks now, and here's how it's gone. So I've really enjoyed making it part of my routine, which has just helped me structure my day a little bit better. You know, I have lunch, drink Magic Mind, get back to animating, etc. Overall, Magic Mind definitely helps with energy. I feel pretty good after drinking it, like the afternoon slump is kind of gone, which is nice. And I did mention that I did miss coffee, but I've gone back to drinking that as well, which gives me an extra boost of energy on top of Magic Mind, which really helps with the focusing throughout the day. So I definitely recommend Magic Mind if you're looking for something that will give you that extra energy boost and help you focus on your tasks. And as always, if you'd like to give Magic Mind a try as well, they're offering 20% off for one-time purchases and 40% off for subscriptions of their drinks to listeners of this podcast. And the latter, the 40%, only lasts for 10 days from this episode. So go to magicmind.co/animation and use the code animation20 to get your Magic Mind discount drinks now. And I've included the links and more details of that offer in the description of this chat, so please go check that out. And now, without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, Ryan and Adam. How you guys doing today? Thanks for joining me.
Really great. Thanks for having us on the show, Terry. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I haven't chatted with a lot of VR and certainly nobody in Metaverse on this podcast. So I think it's going to be quite an interesting chat, and I have a lot of questions. But before we dive into that, why don't we kind of so I have two guests today, which is a little bit atypical. So why don't we dive into one at a time? Ryan, why don't you start and tell me kind of, what do you do, and why are you in a career of animation in the first place?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I have been in this industry since 1996, so I think about 26 years now. Started out as a modeler at a company called Viewpoint, and just worked into animation, rigging, texturing, all sorts of fun stuff. Even making toys at one point. So. Wow. Yeah,
when you say modeler, do you mean like 3D modeling, like in CG Max back in the day, or is this like model making, like physically?
3D
modeling.
3D modeling.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and fashion modeling.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But yeah. So it's 3D modeling, and then got into all of my stuff kind of surrounds the 3D area, and then when I got into toys, it was more more 3D modeling, but then 3D printing into a physical object. I got in this industry. It's something I've always wanted to do since I was a little kid. I wanted to do something with art and cartoons and stuff like that, and one of those people that followed my dreams, and I never grew up.
Nice.
All the toys back here.
Yeah, wow. Your career is interesting because you started kind of, when CG was back in the early days, I guess. How have you managed to, keep up with technology and the times, and also span into such like 3D printing and toys and all sorts of different things? You've worked on movies, and how have you kept up with the learning curve of this?
Yeah, never stop learning. That's what I have to do. I have a hard time getting complacent and thinking, oh, I'm only going to do this, and by continuing to learn, I'm not only keeping things interesting and keeping my attention going, but I'm keeping up with everything that's growing.
Nice. I'm just curious, how do you force yourself to learn something new if you're not particularly using it on your job? Like you said, 3D printing, for instance. I'm sure you were in a career that wasn't using 3D printing at some point, and then you branched into it. Did you kind of have it as a hobby on your own, or did you kind of apply into something and have an opportunity to learn?
Yeah, I actually had a job that helped me learn. Was working at a company called Deep Root, and we were making, or I was making toys for pinball machines. And so that actually, but it was something I was always interested in. And so that actually evolved into, I started making my own little toys that I joined up with my sister, and we were making little toys for people to print out on their own printers. And
Wow.
yeah, it's a lot of fun, but to motivate myself, like I mentioned, this was something I've always wanted to do. So not only is this my job, but it's my hobby as well. Once I'm done here, I like to do something artistic in some other realm. So it's just I'm just constantly playing.
Once you're done working, you like to work, it sounds like.
That's Ryan. That's Ryan to a T.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to chat about, kind of what you're doing these days with Future House. So Adam, why don't we jump over to you and, where did things kind of start from you and how did you end up where you are now?
Sure. Okay. Well, let's see. I started I started doing 3D in a modeling place as well, called Zygote when I was in college. And they were actually broke off from Viewpoint. So that's interesting. It's kind of similar origin story. But they were working on 3D modeling, and that was that was my first part-time job in 3D. And then when I graduated school, I went to go work at Digital Domain on the movie iRobot, and that was my first feature film. And I arrived in LA, was here to seek my fortune, and looked with the bright lights of the Hollywood sign above me, and things were promising and exciting and shiny and bright. And then I started working as a pipeline technical director. I don't even know if they knew what I was going to do when they hired me, except that I wrote code and I wrote some Mel scripts back when Maya was all Mel. And I wrote tools for publishing animation and for setting up scenes and basically a bunch of pipeline stuff. And I didn't even know that was a job. And then I did some character rigging, and I did some, even some effects. I had some effects shots. So I got to try out all sorts of things. They even had me try some look dev, and I was really bad at that. I didn't even know what look dev was. I was just kind of muddling my way around. And so that was a really like deep dive education in filmmaking, all the parts of it at Digital Domain, which is a good place. And we were making some really awesome work. So then I went over to Weta after that, moved to New Zealand, got to work for Peter Jackson on King Kong. That was so fun. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to do creatures. So long story short, wandered around the various visual effects houses. It was I almost feel like I was a kung fu student learning from all the masters, in the various places. And then went to ILM, went to Sony, did a little time at MPC, just working on projects here and there and meeting all sorts of people, finding all these different pipelines and figuring out how it works. And then Ryan and I met up, like it was like 5 or 6 years ago. I started working at a place called Within, and they were a new startup in the VR space back in when VR was still, it was like the second wave of VR newness, and a lot of investment money was getting thrown at VR, but it was starting to drop off a little bit. They'd raised a lot of money. It was a man named Chris Milk. He's a director of a number of music videos, started this company. And we started working on this game called, it was a VR experience called Lamb Child Superstar. And there was a lot of character animation. And it was done in conjunction with OK Go, the band. And it was really fun. All these animals were playing all these instruments, very, very entertaining stuff. You can even find some videos online of it. And so we needed an animator. And so I found Ryan and saw his reel, and I was like, oh, this guy's so cool. And it turns out he like lived down the street from me, which was really cool. And so because I was commuting at the time from Utah to Los Angeles, like I would fly there every other week back and forth because this is where my family was. And we'd moved from LA, and then I was flying back to LA. So but it was a lot of fun. It was a deep dive into VR and into figuring out like what are the unique aspects of VR and the user interface, the game design, how that differs from normal game design, how that differs from film. And I got to tell you, it was like the hardest job I've ever had to get, or the hardest job to get, because, as I was interviewing for it and talking about it, they're like, well, you're a movie guy. Can you do VR, right? Can you do real time? All your stuff was pre-rendered. And that was like the first time I'd ever heard the word pre-rendered before. I'm like, no, it's just rendered, and they're like, no, we're real-time rendered. I'm like, it's all the same, right? Well, it's 3D, right? Like character rigging, animation, like it's those principles apply, right? There's new things that you're going to learn as far as like the tech art and as far as methodologies for rendering, but it's new software. And so I jumped in and wrote some tools and was the animation director there and hired animators and got people together. And we built this thing out with some really cool people that I got to work with. Fast forward a couple of years later, Ryan and I worked at another studio, and then that studio was folding and downsizing. And so I started Future House, and here we are making a lot of cool VR games, film, TV, animation, all across the board, whether it's real time or pre-rendered or offline.
Wow, that's quite the journey. I want to backtrack a little bit and just kind of ask you about more of the journey aspect. It sounds like you were going from studio to studio constantly. Was that because of just contracts, or were you looking for something, or just the nature of the business? And also, how does it feel to also always be jumping into studios constantly? I guess both of you throughout your career have done that.
That's a good question. It was just because I kept getting fired. No, I'm just kidding about that. But it's because it's almost like, you're like wandering around. You're like Siddhartha seeking the true meaning of life by wandering from place to place. I was seeking the true meaning of computer graphics. So it was actually really very cool because I guess it's part of my entrepreneurial spirit. I have a hard time settling down. And so the first time, was a year-long project at Digital Domain. The second was a year-long project at Weta. And then after that, I wanted to go learn from all the different studios. Like I got so excited when I would get to go to a new place. I'm like, oh, I haven't tried Sony yet. Let's see how they do things over there. And, I've had a lot of VFX artists refer to it as chasing movies too. You're like, oh, that project sounds so cool. I want to go do that. And so they, have moved all over the world, from London to Singapore to Australia, back to LA, up to Vancouver, chasing movies. Like, oh, this movie's going on right now. I really want to work on that. I'm going to go work on that. And if you're young and single, you have that, mobility. And so I was at the time, and now I have, I have a wife and kids. And so life changes and it's a little bit different. But it was a fun learning experience, and I really, it was funny because the studios would say, hey, so do you want to stay? You want like a staff position? And I'd be like, nah, I'm gonna go, travel or try another place soon, right? And I really valued that time in between where I could work on my own projects. I could figure out, test my own theories. I started writing a lot. I started, another company before Future House Studios. And so that was an opportunity to explore and learn from so many people. And that's actually come into play a lot now from the studios, because I'm always calling up old friends from the various places I worked who are either coming to work for us, referring somebody, bringing us jobs, networking, or, calling up a producer yesterday. Hey, how did you do this one thing? And, people are so willing to help, and it's awesome because I've built this network of friends and colleagues.
Oh, wow. So I want to chat about, Future House a little bit. How big is the company right now? Because it's fairly new, right? Like you said, you started another company before, and then you started Future House, and you've worked on a whole bunch of projects. So how big is the team, and like, what does the structure look like? Because I've talked to a lot of kind of newer studios that kind of take this, build up a freelancer roster route when they get a big project, and then scale down to like nothing when they don't have a project. So I'm just wondering, how does, Future House look?
Well, it is similar in a lot of ways to that, because that's really the model. So the model to thrive and survive and to grow in this industry is to be flexible on headcount. So right now we have about 10 or 11 full-time employees, but then we have about another 40 contractors who are working on various things. The difference is they're around the world. They might be working on something for a couple of weeks or a couple of months at a time, and we're bringing them in for a specific skill set. They work remotely, and then they plug in as needed, and we bring them on for various contracts. And so sometimes that comes down to, there's like 25 head count, right? And then right now, if you add the 10 and the 40, it's around 50.
Yeah. I'm wondering, you've been to every studio in the world, it sounds like. What are kind of the biggest takeaways that you took when building your own studio? Like that you would hit the ground running and be successful. What was the kind of one of the biggest things that you focused on to make sure that you would be a success and you would get kind of unique client projects and be able to hire and sustain 11 people?
So I think one of the biggest things is coming up with an efficiency. If I learned from the different technologies, I saw all those pipelines. Now, granted, we're still building out our pipeline, making it more robust, but at least there's that workflow, and it's getting there. It's really great, the things that we can do, but there's a workflow there, an understanding of like, hey, you've got to set templates up of how things work, whether it's in the workflow for how the studio operates, but also in the workflow or the templates for like how you bring on a contractor and what that process looks like. We're always improving those processes, and that's important so that you can like plug in and rinse and repeat. So in other words, you got to have a solid, here's a contract that you get, here's how you log in, here's how you use the system, here's how you you log your time, here's when you get paid. Just all those systems are really important so that people can have a good experience and that we can be highly scalable. And then we have people in place who are trained to handle those various aspects.
Gotcha. So is it fair to say like most of your time is actually spent running the company, but rather than like doing kind of the artistic direction and whatnot, like Ryan does?
Absolutely. Ryan, like it's the Ryan Birds of the company that is the product that people are coming to. And I'm the sort of air traffic control, like go over this, we got to go this way. Oh, we got a fire to put out over here, or we're all moving this way for strategy reasons. We're going to do, we're focusing on more game development this month because that's where we've had the most response. I told myself when I started the company that I was going to make sure that I allocated time and resources to business development, that was a big part of it, because you got Ryan over here who's like, Ryan's an awesome generalist. Ryan is not only is he a very, very good animator, but he rigs, he models, he does all these other things that are just incredible. And so if I'm out there running around saying, hey guys, we can do all this awesome stuff because Ryan can do it, right? And then we also have, Jacob, Mike, a whole slew of very talented people, Dakota, Tony, Weston, there's just all these great people who are creating the product, right? But then we have others who are going out and making sure everybody knows that that we have a product that we can create.
Gotcha. I'm wondering if you can, maybe this is more of a question for Ryan, because it sounds like you're kind of deep into the animation aspects of these projects. How does virtual reality kind of, the animation and art direction and whatnot different from, say, a film or just a regular video game? Like, can you kind of take me into the ins and outs of how you would, supervise the animation of a VR project when somebody can maybe walk around and look at all angles and like, is it that much difference than, something else?
There is a lot of difference. With a movie, you're animating to the camera.
Yeah.
And like you said, with VR, you're animating to everywhere. If you can walk around something, or you can, see things from all different angles, you want to make sure that it looks good and believable from all angles. And there's a lot of cheating that goes on when you're animating to a camera versus animating to any angle that can be seen. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different steps that we take, not only, in the animation, but as well as modeling, texturing, rigging, all of that stuff requires different different things that we can and can't do. For a movie, we're doing a movie rig. We can do all the joints in the world. We can have all different effects on it and everything, and we don't worry about it. Once it goes into an engine, for games or VR or anything, all of a sudden you've got a ton of restrictions depending on what that platform is. And you'll have people come to us, or we'll have people come to us and we'll say, all right, I want this character to be very elastic and everything. And which is really easy when you're working on movie stuff, because you can add a billion joints, but then when you're working on a game or other engine platforms, you run into let's see, these are our limitations. But one of the great things about what we're doing right now is that we're pushing those limits. We're taking the limits that we have, and we're trying to say, okay, let's see how close to a movie we can get within the platforms. And so that's one of the challenges that are fun for us to figure out, as well as clients come and they're like, we don't even think that this is possible, and we're like, we'll make it possible. or we'll die trying.
Yeah. I'm wondering, how does classic cinematography and like composition and stuff play into VR when you can't really set up a shot for one camera angle? How do you make sure that a viewer is experiencing, a super aesthetic pleasing, making sure that they see all the key moments of, the event or whatnot that's taking place? They're not turned around or something. Like, how do you make sure that the person is having, an artistically designed cinematography experience in VR when you can't control what they do?
That's such a good question, because you do have that issue of like, you can look all over the place. So we just completed a game called Transformers Decepticon Invasion, and we're working with Dark Slope and VR Studios for build this game for Dave and Buster's. And with all the animation, we had to design, where's that camera looking, right? And you can't make someone look the way that you want them to, except by subtle cues of like sound or action. And you said, if you want them to look over in this direction, you've got to have some big motion over there that attracts their attention. So it's almost like you're framing the whole thing with these subtle cues, so that you're encouraging the player to look in the right place, so you can design that whole aesthetic around it.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Are you kind of creating like rules and formulas for this? Like, having a sound or a big action lead them to that direction, make sure they're looking there, makes a lot of sense. But it's kind of, this space that traditional, storyboarding and whatnot hasn't really figured out how to teach or formula yet. So are you kind of coming up with these rules and whatnot on your own? Or are you looking for examples, or are you still just following basic animation principles of like, action and movement?
It feels, a lot of it feels, intuitive when you're in the moment, and you say, okay, how can we get this, get the viewer to look over here? So for example, there's a point where you're with Bumblebee on top of a building, and then Starscream comes out. So you want to make sure that people are looking at Starscream when he emerges. And so you can do things like, have arrange the objects on the building so they're kind of pointing in a wedge toward where you want someone to go. It's a lot of subtle level design and cues that happen like that. Another example was actually the project that Ryan and I worked on when we were at Within. I was animation directing that one, and there was this moment where this cow comes out. He's called the Holy Cow, and it's like at the end, but he was just a cow standing on a pedestal. But this big climactic moment, these pipes come out, folding out all over the place, and these curtains unfold, and it's this gigantic spectacle, right? But if your back is turned to it, you're not going to see it. So there's some noises that are going on, and that draw you over there, and then that spectacle draws you in. So oh, this is the place that I'm supposed to be looking, and it's theater. So you got to think of it as like theater in the round, but you're sitting in the center, and the theater's happening.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering, when you're hiring for these projects, because like even when you said getting the VR project was your hardest hire, what kind of skills are you looking for in artists that, have maybe worked in video games or traditional media or movies or whatnot? Are you looking specifically for people who have VR experience? Or are you looking for, art animators who have this kind of skill to draw your eye and, build spaces and whatnot?
I think we're looking for anyone who's a great animator. The rest we can coach them and treat and guide them along the way. What do you think, Ryan?
I was just going to say that, it's a lot of us, pointing them in the right direction, just taking somebody that already has the skill set and then, saying, hey, this is the way we're going with it. And sometimes for them, it's, if we get somebody that's worked on nothing but movies, we'll bring them in there and they'll be like, whoa, this has to look good from every angle. How did, and so it's just, but they pick up very quickly.
Okay, nice. Do you see this kind of, is the marketplace picking up in terms of demand for VR artists and VR projects? Because I went to a VR video game actually last week, and to be honest, I felt kind of overwhelmed because there's just aliens flying at you from every direction. I didn't know where to look. I was just shooting everywhere, and my friends were all like running around. And by the end, I was just so stressed. But anyways, that's a side note. But do you see, the market like really expanding from your view now that you're actually in the thick of it and creating these spaces? Like, is there a growing natural market for this, or is it, it's kind of still in its infancy, or only certain projects or something?
So there was something interesting announced in the recent Meta Connect conference that, and let me see if I can get this right. But out of all the games on the Oculus store, 1 out of 3 had made $1 million or more.
Huh.
And I think there were only 400 games on the store.
So 150 or something.
Right. So with that, what that tells me is there is an opportunity to build those games.
Yeah.
And for a developer to be able to recoup their costs and make some money, that's what makes them want to go do the next game and hire, 10 more animators, and then go to the next game and hire 10 more animators after that. So if that shows me that there's a growing demand for virtual reality. It hasn't exploded yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that it will not explode until it's super convenient and very cool for users to jump in there. The Oculus Quest was a big step in that direction. As those stats indicate to me that it's moving in the right direction, and those are promising.
So does most of your client work kind of come from stuff like Dave & Buster's versus like Oculus games or whatnot?
So many different things. So interestingly enough, we do a lot of corporate.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So really, really fascinating things. We'll have corporations come to us, and there was a fintech company that came to us and said, hey, we've all been locked away from each other during the pandemic. We'd love to get together. We're going to send VR headsets to everybody in our company and have them join in a custom world in 2 weeks. You ready? And we go, whoa, hold on a second. Whoa, 2
weeks.
2 weeks. So we put together an entire experience, and we built it off an existing platform where everybody got together, and it was actually a custom world that we designed and built and then dropped into alt space. And so everyone jumped into alt space, and they were playing games. They were exploring this world. They were dropping off of bridges and finding hidden characters. And it was so cool to see because people were laughing their heads off. You had these executives at this fintech company who were dancing around, and having the time of their lives, because when you're in VR, it's like you become a kid again, and It's just awesome and cool. And so it was like this Mario land with all these floating islands. And so applications like that have come to us a lot as companies are looking to get into VR and provide a cool experience for their employees.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I've actually attended a couple of online conferences where like breakout rooms are actually like your little avatar, and you walk around and like you can talk to people and play games and music and stuff, which has been interesting during the pandemic. But it makes sense because a lot of companies are working remotely. So do you see kind of this corporate market for VR expanding a lot faster than kind of video games? Because it sounds like a corporation has much more financial freedom to send all their employees VR kits versus like your average consumer buying an Oculus Rift.
I mean, video games is huge, right? Like it's just a $200 billion industry. There's like so many people playing video games, and that's always increasing. Like Gen Z's engagement with video games is like off the charts compared to the previous generation. But corporate is a huge opportunity. You know, people are doing trainings. They're teaching people how to operate in high danger situations in VR before they get there, like on oil rigs or mining or other places. And so that's fascinating because VR provides that ability.
I didn't know. So you can like you're trained to be on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean, and you hop into your VR headset first to like kind of get some experience. Interesting. You also work with the Metaverse. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. Ryan, do you want to take that one?
Sure. We all know that the metaverse is new.
Yeah.
And, it's something that we're all trying to feel out, and we see it as a very exciting opportunity to get in there and not only help shape what the metaverse is, but also be a part of the growth and seeing the new things that are coming. Not only from the social media side of it, but the game side of it. It's very exciting. And again, it's in its infancy. It's still growing, but it's a very awesome experience. And we're seeing everything from VR to AR to XR and even just games, people connecting. How could you not want to be a part of that? It's just amazing.
Right. Can you maybe define what that means a little bit more? Like what are you specifically doing with the metaverse? Like what is your I guess, if you were to focus on this as a business, what is the goal with growing with the metaverse? Does this mean you're partnering with Facebook, or you're creating stuff that fits into the metaverse, or like I just don't know.
We're partnering with a lot of companies. Well, we can't necessarily say
Right,
a lot
right, of course.
we're partnering with, but we're finding a lot of interest in it, and those partnerships are partially helping to design. What do we do? How do we engage people? How do we bring people into it? And I'll let Adam speak to this, but we've done a few things on our end to kind of help push that and see, people say, oh, there's a need for this. This is where people want to be. And so as far as specific people we're dealing with, it's surprisingly a lot of companies are very interested in this, and because it's new, we're not hearing a lot about that right now, but we will soon.
You can think of like the metaverse as every web page that you would visit, instead of a web page, it's a full-blown video game, or at least a casual video game.
So like I go to Wikipedia and try to learn about like the Titanic or something.
Right? You could actually traverse the Titanic and see it sink. And like,
so I'm on the Titanic now.
Yeah, welcome to the Titanic. Good luck. But that's the exciting thing about what the metaverse offers is full immersion and interaction. I always use this example for people like, let's say you're a World of Warcraft fan. I actually worked on the movie Warcraft. But I ask people, okay, so how many hours have you spent watching the movie? And they'll say, oh, I watched it like 10 times. I love that movie. Okay, so you spent 20 hours watching that movie. How many hours have you spent playing the game if you're a World of Warcraft game fan? And it's like thousands of
They're
hours.
like, do you mean years or hours?
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. And it adds up. And so that's because games are so engaging. They keep our attention. We have these game loops that we want to be in. And so brands we talk a lot with brands who want to be in the metaverse, and they come to us to figure out, like, how do I do this metaverse thing? And we propose to them some creative concepts like, okay, well, we create you a world that's heavily branded, that's centered around your product, that's exciting and fun for people to go to. Nike has done this in Roblox. They've done a very successful metaverse in Roblox. Walmart did.
When you say metaverse in Roblox, are you talking about like the Facebook metaverse in Roblox, or the concept of the metaverse, like having a concert in Roblox?
When I say the metaverse, I'm applying it much more generally. Like Facebook has Meta, they have Horizons World, and that's their version of the metaverse. But everybody else has got metaverse applications, and so Facebook doesn't own the metaverse.
I see. Okay.
It's a good portion. But a lot of groups have their. I mean, Facebook wants to be the metaverse, right?
Yeah. So you're talking about like when Fortnite did like a concert, or like Roblox did like a
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Gotcha. So the metaverse term can be applied broadly to any type of 3D interaction that people are going to. That's that differs a bit from a game, right? Because you have a game where, let's take like Call of Duty, right? Like that's a very dedicated core game loop. Whereas you have the metaverse, it's usually more casual, it's usually more social, it's less about one core game loop and story, and more about open world exploration or casual gaming.
Gotcha. So when you're talking about, every web page and brands and stuff, because brands have always even just been making their own video games. Like I remember like playing like Nintendo, there's a McDonald's game where you're like jumping around and then there's like a recycling level. Like it's always been happening. So do you see brands more of like sticking themselves into social gathering places in the metaverse, or creating specific spaces for them?
Absolutely, 100%. So for example, to go back to the Meta example, so in Meta created in Horizon Worlds the Wendyverse and I don't know if you've heard about this, but it was pretty amazing because about 52 million people saw that, and so by some counts it was 600 million and impressions. And you would go into this thing, you would put your VR headset on, you'd walk in, and there's this land with Wendy's hamburgers, and you think, oh, that's so dumb, that's so boring, and yet you go there and it's kind of delightful because you're playing these mini games there, and there's actually other people there, and you're like, what are you doing here? I don't know, I'm just checking this out, this is kind of cool, and you're exploring it together. And then you walk back in and you can like get behind the counter and serve up some fries if you want, and then if you go into the break room and you open the refrigerator, it teleports you to this other place where you can take some cool selfies. You can go to the biscuit dome and play basketball. So it's nonsense but fun, right? And people are finding that they engage like that. And so Roblox is very similar to Roblox. Everyone's going around playing different Roblox games. They're just having fun trying things out. And brands are finding that this is a good way for people to engage with their brand, especially if you like that brand, right? Like Nike, people like Nike. And so they're like, oh, I'm going to go to this Nike world and check this out. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. I'm wondering, how does the like sales process differ from, movies have producers and giant investors and distributors, and TV shows have broadcasters and government grants and funding. How are you getting, clients for VR projects? Are you going to sales conferences where a lot of businesses are looking for innovative marketing techniques? Are you just, your phone is ringing off the hook? Do you have like a dedicated sales team to go out and find these projects, or is it word of mouth? Like, how did you get, other than, the first VR project you were brought on, how have you been able to continue to make this a business for yourself?
So a lot of it is word of mouth. People come to trust what we've done, and then they come back with new projects and they say, oh, you worked really well with us on this. Let's have you do something new. Let's have you try this next one. We're at conferences a lot to meet people.
What kind of conference would you go to?
So for example, like Augmented World Expo, that's really centered around augmented reality. And so we do a lot of AR work. We work a lot on Eighth Wall to do web AR. We do other AR applications for people. We've won some awards from Niantic for some of our work, which is really cool. And so we we're always, you got to talk about it. That's the funny thing, is if you don't talk about it, then people don't hear about it. And so I usually make a post on LinkedIn every day to just tell people what we're doing or what we're up to, or
Hey
talk.
guys.
Yeah, hey guys.
One of the things I want to add too is that we have, and Adam won't say this, but we have a killer dev team, a business development team, which is led up by Adam. And guys, they are so good at going out there and bringing in that work. That Adam's got a lot of great, he's been in the industry forever, so he's got a lot of great relationships. And we have people that hear his name and they're like, oh, absolutely, where do I sign up? And but we've got a great team. We've got Kenton and Dakota and Robert and Eli that are all just they just, it blows me away how good they are at this, because that's just something that I'm not a good salesman. And so to have them go and just it takes a big team to do that too. And so I wanted to point that out as well.
Nice. I'm wondering, Ryan, while I have you here, I'm wondering, from like an artistic standpoint, are there any things about VR, AR that you haven't integrated from traditional animation mediums that you still want to see happen? I mean, you mentioned kind of restrictions with some of the animation and what you can do, but are there things that you miss about working in, TV, movie, game land that VR and AR hasn't integrated yet?
That's a good question. I think some of the bigger things that I miss is the control that you get with using unlimited joints and using different clusters and blend shapes and I mean, we can use blend shapes, but using all of these different things to make a character really come to life and to really sell it. But we're starting to get there though. One of the things that we're seeing, especially with Unreal 5, is that there are some things that we're able to do that were just there's just no way. If you would have told me 10, 15, 20 years ago, hey, you're going to be able to do what you can do in Unreal 5, which a lot of that is really crazy amount of polygons and joints and stuff like that, I'd have thought you were crazy, like there's just no way. But that's the exciting part about this, is that we are slowly moving into being, catching up, getting real-time rendering, stuff like that. The stuff that I really missed in, incorporating into that is starting to happen. And as we keep going, there'll be a time where you can't tell the difference, where you can't tell the difference of something that was rendered in real time and rendered in the movie. So very exciting.
Sounds like it's exciting just to be part of the journey. I'm wondering, if somebody's listening and either they haven't started yet, or they're in a career in TV or movie or video games or something else. What is the one thing they can do, maybe like right now, to move into the VR AR space with people like working with people like you? What's like the number one thing that you kind of look for when you're hiring or working with people that people who want to move into the space can do?
We love we love artists that know how to use Unreal and Unity.
That makes sense.
we love that so much. And just even
you said in Unity?
Yeah, Unity and Unreal.
Yeah, okay.
There are several other things like platforms like Eighth Wall, which is more centered around AR. But just an artist that can go outside their comfort zone. A lot of time, we'll get artists who are like, oh no, that's outside of the art realm, I don't want to touch it. But really it's not. It's a lot of what you're doing in Unreal and Unity is really, a big part of it is art. It's making things work, and not only work but look good. And so that's one of the main things that we love to hear, is like, oh, I've done this and I've played in Unreal for this long and I've got the experience with VFX and lighting and stuff like that. Those are things that's music to our ears.
So grab a download Unity or Unreal and just start playing around and see what's up. If you can come to us and make like a beautiful scene that's well lit in Unreal and you fly the camera through there, our jaws will just drop and we'll cry and we'll say, you're hired, you know,
You're
like
crying through tears. You're
you
hired.
know, yeah, it's that understanding of how to use all the tools, like the pre-existing assets, like what can you do with the mega scans, and how can you use the asset store in Unity to just build. You don't have to make it all yourself, but you have to have an understanding of how to assemble that and make it look really good.
Totally.
That's tech artists, right? Like we always need good tech artists.
Nice, nice, nice. Besides, kind of the technical skills, are there types of personalities that really fit well with this type of work? I mean, Ryan, you said you're always kind of curious and always learning. I'm sure that's a big plus, but is there a certain type of person that really excels in this area?
But people, we always love people that come in with a can-do attitude.
Yeah.
There have been a few people that we've hired, they may have not been the most talented people, but their attitude was that if I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out. And that goes a long way, because that the talent and the skills we can help teach and train, but that kind of attitude is a lot harder to teach. And so when somebody comes in with a great attitude, it's like I'll do what it takes to get the job done, then we know that we've got somebody that's going to succeed. And yeah, that's a big thing for me.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
For me too. I love it. I love it when somebody just comes in and says, okay, I'm so excited to work. Let's make something awesome. And you can throw an assignment at them, and they may not know how to do it, but they'll figure it out, and they'll work with us, and they'll say, oh, I don't know how to do that. So we'll say, okay, well, let's get this person over here who knows how to show you a couple things. And then someone who can do research, someone who can, who's willing to try. I've had artists that we've hired before who said, oh, sorry, I don't do that. And
why would you work with us?
we're a small shop, right? They say, I'm an animator, but I don't animate cameras, right? Or just as an example. And we say, well, the job right now that we need done is animating cameras. So, if there's no character animation right now, we can't keep floating you on the payroll, right? And so come animate some cameras, right? And we love it when people do that and they jump in and they say, oh, but next I want to learn rigging, or I want to learn how to make great topology for models, or I want to learn the tech art, how to do this in Unity, how to hook up the animation blend trees in Unity so that works properly. All of those things are those people who are willing to challenge themselves. They become better artists because they can make beautiful things.
It almost doesn't matter.
They have more tools to do it.
Yeah. So as long as you have the basic, artistic and technical skill set and a really can-do learning and collaborative mindset, it sounds like you'd be a good fit for working in this type of scenario.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do us with the great reel and then work with us to make it even better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe as we're just wrapping up, both of you guys have been around town when it comes to animation and projects and working on really, really cool stuff, and you both ended up in VR. I'm wondering in AR, what's next for you guys? Where do you see kind of, is this you've reached the thing that you've finally found that has answered all your questions with animation and art, or is this another stepping stone to something else in the future?
Well, that's a really good question. I know for Future House, we're now stepping into the world where we're going to be developing our own products, not just doing service. We're making some of our own creative work, and that's going to have to do with IP, creative IP, but also real world metaverse applications, some things that we think are going to be really fun for people to play and dive into. And so keep watching, because we'll have some cool announcements as we start to build those things out and have more to show.
For sure. Ryan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that big question I just asked?
Yeah. No,
have you arrived?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned before, we don't want to be complacent, and we want to continue to grow. We'll master the things that are in front of us, and then we'll continue to the next thing. And if there isn't a next thing, we'll make one up, and we'll we'll go from there. But that's one of the great things about Future House is that we are always doing new things and we're always looking to the future, which from the name you can
future new things, looking forward house. That's what you should.
That's right. That's right.
Studio to me.
And a house is, it's a collection of people all who are trying to go. Think of it like a house in Harry Potter, right? A house of like-minded people all headed towards the same goal.
Totally, yeah. As kind of we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you wanted to share with those listening who, are super interested in AR or VR or just anything else we chatted about, do you think?
Go out there, start building, keep learning.
Nice.
We'll see you soon. I'm sure we'll run into you.
Yeah. Ryan, how about you?
Same, it's just get out there and, if this is something that you're passionate about, learn it and learn it every which way that you can, and there'll be opportunities.
Love it. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ryan and Adam, so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I've enjoyed picking your brains about, kind of the metaverse and what's going on there. It's been super interesting to hear. And I hope we see a lot more of your Future House future projects very soon in the future.
To the future.
Thanks for
having us on the show. Appreciate it.
Of course. And if you're listening and you want to, check out or follow Future House or Ryan and Adam, I'm going to include their Twitter, Instagram, their website, which is futurehousestudios.com, and their LinkedIn's in the description of this chat. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, bye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.